Hey Bookbellas and fellas, Kira here, and today I want to discuss an article that I recently found. While browsing the vast corners of the interwebs, I came across an article on Bustle, which I'm going to leave down in the description area because it was kind of an interesting article. They were describing types of readers, and upon going through their 13 types of readers, I had to think to myself, I was like, actually some of these are kind of relatable. And I don't know if they will relate to you. I don't know if you will feel like you are any of these reader types, but I felt like I was at least a couple of these, if not quite a few. Now, I don't feel like they covered all the bases, but it was just kind of an interesting concept, and I kind of wanted to share the types of readers that they discuss. If you are any of these reader types or are interested in talking about your reader type or your thoughts on this article, please leave a comment down there in the comment area because I want to know your reader type. I think we all have types. I think like I don't know that we all fit into one area neatly, but we all have a type. We all have books that we prefer. We all have things that we do while we read that makes us unique readers. While this article was kind of narrow in some aspects, it did touch on a few things that I thought was very interesting. So Bustle discusses 13 types of readers. The first type that they discuss is called series junkie. These are people who like series because it's really hard for them to get into books in general. So what they do is they start a series and they flow from book to book to book. I mean, it's not the fact that people love series just because sometimes they have trouble getting into books and bonding with characters. And, series, of course, give you more time with the characters. They give you more time to bond into that world. They give you more time to experience it. But some people do not like standalone novels. When I was growing up, this was me for the longest time. I had such a hard time reading a book that only had one book because there are so many questions when you only have one book. And it's like, okay, so how did this relate to that? Or how did that relate to this? And with a series, you kind of are more able to get those answers than you are with a standalone book. Now, don't get me wrong, like I have read some really interesting standalone books that were amazing, but some people just love series. Now, they did also discuss like the people like that do like series are also more likely to reread them. I don't know how statistically true this is, but a lot of people love to revisit their worlds after they get out of them. The second type of reader that they talk about is the literary snob. They are the ones who love the classics, only classics. They talked about like how they are the only ones that read the highbrow literature, which is like Proust. Of course, they are totally against young adult novels. And I don't know if that's necessarily true. I've known some people who really love young adult novels, but they also really love the classics because the classics are the classics. And while some people don't really have a preference for classics because sometimes classics are hard to get into, there are some hardcore classic readers out there who won't read anything else. I wish I could go through and read more classics, but I have to have a certain mindset for that. Otherwise, I'm not going to be much into reading it. I don't know like if literary snob is the right word, but that's the word that they use in the article. The third type of reader that they discussed is the polygamous reader, the reader that reads multiple books at the same time. They talk about in the article how multitasking among multiple articles is so much fun. I can honestly say that I've been there. It depends on the books that I'm reading, whether or not I'm going to want to read multiple books at once. Especially when I first start a book, it takes me a little bit to get into. And sometimes having a book that I'm already in the middle of really helps with getting into a new book because I can go through and I can read a few chapters of that new book and then go back to the one that I'm already into. And then after I'm done reading the one that I'm already into, once I, felt like I've retained enough from that one, go back to the one that I've just started. And that kind of can help me sometimes progress on my way through new books that I'm just starting out with. Some people don't really like that. Some people like to read one book at a time, which is totally cool too. It just depends on what kind of reader type you are. I've known a lot of people who only like to read one book at a time. Once again, that all depends on your personal preference. Fourth type of book reader that they discuss is the habitual book clubber. The habitual book clubber typically likes to join book clubs because not only do they get a chance to meet new people, to talk about books, they also get a chance to expand themselves and get a chance to have access to a wide variety of books. Of course, book clubs can be like really fun because it gives you an opportunity to meet new people, to talk about books, to agree or disagree, have great discussions. It's almost a shared experience. And Dan Arley, who is a behavioral economist, once talked about how our relationships are the sum of experience that we share together. So this is a great way to meet people. And for a lot of people, people, this is what keeps us reading, is the ability to share these experiences we have in books with other people. That's kind of like what I feel like BookTube does for us though too. So I mean, kind of, like in a lot of ways, like we are just one giant book club discussing a bunch of books. And they also talk about how these habitual book clubbers are usually a part of more than one book club. The fifth type of book reader that they talk about is the partial reader. These are the people that pick up books and they get a little way through them and then they don't really start. They're not really completionists and they have a really hard time finishing books. I think we have all been there. It depends on the book. It depends on your personal preference. We've all gotten to a point like where we are struggling with a book. If you are an avid book reader, you're going to find books that you struggle with. So I don't know that we necessarily can fall into one category on this. I think some people struggle more than others. I think that some people have a harder time finishing books than others because, like the novelty kind of wears off sometimes. And, and if they don't do things in the story to keep you interested, then that novelty is only going to take you so far. After a while, like when you're about halfway through the book, it's not really novel anymore. Like, did you see what I did there? Pun intended. And so these partial readers simply go through and they start a book without actually finishing the last one that they were in the middle of. I have a whole stack of books that are like that. Not the fact that I have trouble finishing them, but sometimes, you get distracted. It happens. Like a new release came out and you're really excited about that release and it's pushed to the top of your TBR. Like I said, a lot of these questions I think, apply to a lot of different readers. I don't think that it just applies to one reader. I think that we are all multiple types. The sixth type of reader that they talk about is the rereader. These are people who love to revisit their old favorites. They love to re-enter those worlds. They feel they are closely bonded with these characters and they feel a close connection, and they like to revisit these worlds on multiple occasions whenever they feel like it. This is what Bustle kind of classifies readers as being the comfort zone readers. These are the people like that, like that sometimes struggle with getting out of the book that they were in. And so Bustle kind of talks about how these particular readers don't really like to go outside of their comfort zone, and I don't necessarily think that's true. I think maybe some people have a comfort zone, especially with genres that they will venture into repeatedly, whereas like there's other genres that they won't really, maybe they'll dabble in, but like they're not really hardcore for that genre. The rereaders are the ones who have a comfort zone. They are in this comfort zone and they love this comfort zone and they love to revisit these characters. The seventh type of book reader is the physical book loyalists. These are the people that do not like ebooks. These are the people that do not think ebooks or audiobooks are actual books. There is a immense amount of loyalty for the physical book. I have respect for physical books. I love physical books. I love the atmosphere. The covers add atmosphere. The end pages add atmosphere. The font, chapter headers, all of this adds atmosphere. And so you really get something with a physical book that you may not get with audio or maybe an ebook even. But I still think they're all books, and I kind of like multiple platforms. I think it's still reading. And the reason why I think it's still reading is because some people cannot digest books in certain ways. Look at that book I read a few weeks ago. It was the 48 Laws of Power that I tried. And I tried a physical copy, I tried an ebook, and then I tried audio. And the only way I was able to get through it was audio. According to the article, there are people who are very, very loyal to the physical book. And while I do have a lot of loyalty for physical books, I also have a lot of loyalty for the other types as well, but there are people out there who don't want any other format, and I totally respect that because physical books can be very atmospheric. The eighth type of reader is the spoiler lover. Some people don't want to go in with surprises. Some people want to know what they are getting themselves into, so they want spoilers and all. So they would rather dive to the end of the book or watch a spoilery review than wait for the ending. They are actually debating whether or not they want to put themselves through heartache and strife to get to the end of this book that may necessarily break their heart. I can totally respect that. I personally am not a spoiler lover because I do like the element of surprise, but there are people out there that are not a huge fan of waiting till the end to find out. In hindsight, though, there are some books that have broken my heart, especially like a romance where if they didn't end up together, And of course, I am definitely my mother's daughter in this because neither one of us like an unhappy ending. That is not the point of watching a movie with a romance in it. That is not the point of reading a romancy book. We don't want to get our hearts broken because, you know, it's tough. So sometimes, you know, like I can definitely see like in those instances, maybe I should have flipped to the back of the book, but would have been as meaningful? Maybe not for me, but then again, I like surprises. Some people don't. So it just depends on the type of reader you are. The ninth type of reader is the nonfiction reader. So some people don't like nonfiction. Some people only like nonfiction. They like to read things that are grounded in reality. They like to read things that are completely grounded in reality. And so they tend to stay away from fiction a lot more because it's really not their cup of tea. Once again, about preference, but there are people out there who are very much into just facts. But most of the people I know that do not read fiction of any sort tend to do so because they're typically reading books in their field. Once again, preference, but you know, I like to read a little bit of both, honestly. The 10th type of reader is the fiction fanatic, people who absolutely love a good story. It's not the fact that fiction fanatics don't like nonfiction, it's that for them, the real story, that they actually feel that the majority of the story is lodged in the fictional account of it. This kind of relates back to something that I mentioned like a few weeks ago about how I feel that sometimes the story is better told through a fictional account than a non-fictional account. The non-fictional account lacks emotionality that the fictional account will give you. In the non-fictional account, it does give you a lot of facts, which are very important and highly valued. But when you think about it objectively, you don't really get to experience it subjectively. When the facts are interlaced with a story, you actually get to immerse yourself a little bit more in the world than if you were just experiencing it objectively. As humans, for our everyday experiences, we do feel things going through life, not just fact. And sometimes facts are facts, and sometimes we experience those objectively, which is fine. It's the alternative viewpoint of our experience. But then you also have the emotions that tend to go along with most of the experiences that you go through. So I can definitely see that why some people are diehard fiction fans over nonfiction, because there are stories within stories within stories, and there are stories within emotions. The 11th type of reader, and I think this is one that people have known very well throughout YouTube, is the adult YA addicts. These are adults that like young adult books. And you know what? I don't think there's any shame in that. Young adult books a lot of times can be a lot easier to get through because they are shorter stories. Sometimes the font's bigger. If you're in the mood to digest a story, sometimes you don't have a lot of time, and sometimes you don't want it to take up a ton of time. And there's no shame in liking young adult books. It doesn't matter what age you are. The ability to digest these stories is just as important in a longer format as it is in a shorter format. I know personally on weeks where I'm really busy, I like reading YA because it doesn't take me that long to get through the story, and I still get to immerse myself in a story and not have to worry about it taking up all this time when I know I have other things on my plate. But what really matters in all of this, what's the most important thing, is that you do you. As long as you're enjoying yourself, as long as you're enjoying the reading, that's all that matters. And there are people, of course, that are going to hate on people for their reading taste, and I don't think that's cool. I'm an adult. I like YA. Granted, it's not the only thing that I read. I read a wide variety of things, but I still love reading YA. It's quick. I get to digest a story, and I don't have to worry about it taking up a ton of time, especially when I'm busy. Now, this next type of reading type is probably the one that people are going to be like, oh no, because I know like with a lot of us hardcore book fans, this is kind of a taboo thing, but it's number 12 in their list, and it's the book to movie adaptation addict. These are the people who love to go watch the movie and then come back out and read the book after they're done. Some people just really love to picture the actors that were in the movie while they read the book. It gives them better visuals. There's no shame in that. I mean, honestly, Ender's Game. I did it for Ender's Game. And honestly, unpopular thing, but I did it for Hunger Games too. I had heard a lot about Hunger Games before it even came out. And after I saw the movie, I literally, on my way home, went out and bought all 3 books and I binged them because I was so in love with it. I don't think that's a bad thing. Sometimes you go through and you want to watch a movie to see how you feel about it, to see if you even want to dive into the book. Have I done it for all movies? No. I mean, like recently I read To All the Boys I've Loved Before, and then I watched the Netflix show, which I actually preferred the movie over the book because of Peter's character, but that is a whole different rant. The last type of reader, the 13th type of reader that they discuss, is the emotional reader. This is the one that reads because they love the emotionality of it. They love to cry. They love to feel sad. They love to feel things. They love to feel anything. And so sometimes when they dive into these books, they are just completely immersed. I have to hand it to people that are able to cry during books. I'm not saying that I have never cried during a book, because I truly have. I mean, Memoirs of a Geisha, the ending totally got me choked up. There are books where I tear up quite a bit, like where I get like that knot in my throat, and it's like I'm so close. Now, granted, for me, physical tears are a difficult feat to accomplish, but I have to hand it to people that are actually able to cry during these books. I give them mad props, because I can't do that. Like, I mean, I can't spring that kind of tearage. I mean, that's amazing, like, for them to be able to do that, to have that, to feel that deeply. So there was also another type of book reader that they never really discussed, and that is the critical book reader. I kind of feel like I am a very critical book reader. I love to read a book for substance. I love to read books because, like, they make me see the world a little bit differently than what I did going into it. They kind of expand my mind. And they don't really discuss this very much, because for me personally, I prefer to go into a book that has really deep quotes, and I actually have a journal that I keep for quotes alone of books that I have read over the year. So for me personally, like, reading a very fluffy contemporary is not really my thing unless it has some deep thoughts to go along with it. So a perfect example of this is Simon versus the Homo sapien Agenda. I really loved that book. It was a really light and fluffy contemporary. It had so many light and fluffy aspects. But what I really, really loved about it was the fact that it also had some very deep thought processes that weren't fluffy. They were insightful. So just for an example of that, one of the quotes that I picked up from there is, "I'm perfectly attuned to every point of contact between us. It's like our nerve endings have found a way to slip through fabric." And I think that was just beautiful. And then the other one that was really hit home for me for Simon versus the Homo sapiens Agenda, which is, this is a very good example. "People are really like houses with vast rooms and tiny windows. And maybe it's a good thing, the way we never stop surprising each other." And so for me, like, that offered a lot more context, a lot more substance. And they didn't mention critical readers in this particular article, but I do think critical readers are a thing. And I am a heavily critical reader. And as long as a contemporary has some depth to go along with it, I love it. But if it's just surface level fluffiness, I tend to struggle with those just basic fluffy books, because while they do give me warm, fuzzy feelings and they are an easy read, I don't feel like I've learned anything about humanity. And I am in this to learn more about my fellow man. I am in this to learn more about the world around me, and I feel that fiction does that for me. Once again, I don't think anybody neatly falls into a particular category. I think everybody's a little bit of each one of these in some ways. I think sometimes people are more of one than they are the other. And I think that we cannot be lumped neatly into a particular type of reader category, because we do encompass a lot of different types. Now, some people may encompass one type more than another, but I think that we all are collectively and uniquely our own readers, and we all read differently, and we all absorb differently, and we all look for different things in books differently. I think what this really amounts to is personal preference, and I don't think that this article was perfect at describing these types of readers, but I do think that it did kind of touch on some really interesting aspects of readers that I kind of hadn't thought about before, and I kind of just wanted to share the article with you. If you like this video, hit like, hit subscribe, and hit the little bell icon so that you can receive emails every time I post. And thank you guys so much for joining me, and thank you so much for watching.